Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session on mid-contract price increases in telecoms advertising. My name is Lade. I am the training and events lead. Today, I'm joined by my two colleagues who will be going through the content and allow themselves to introduce themselves now.
Hi, I'm Duncan. I'm a senior complaints executive.
Hi, I'm Beth. I work in the regulatory policy team at CAP. We're the body that writes the UK's advertising rules and guidance.
Thanks both. Just a bit of housekeeping before we begin. The session is going to be recorded and a copy of the recording will be uploaded on our website. Also, if you do have any questions during the session, please do pop them in the Q&A box, and we will have a little bit at the end to answer any questions that you may have about what we've discussed today. Right, well, I'm going to stop talking now and hand over to Beth, who will be leading us through the first bit of this session.
Thanks, Lade. Thanks for everyone for coming along today to this webinar on CAP's new guidance on the presentation of mid-contract price rises in advertising for telecoms contracts. We're here to give you a brief overview of this new piece of guidance aimed at preventing consumers from being misled by advertising for mobile or broadband services that are subject to an increase in the monthly price during the initial term. The guidance was published back in June of this year, following a public consultation which saw us assess submissions from a range of stakeholders, with the analysis and outcome of that published on our website. The guidance relates to ads in various types of broadcast and non-broadcast media and will come into force in mid-December, following a 6-month grace period. The aim of this session is to help you get an understanding of the guidance to aid with any changes to campaigns you may need to make in the run-up to the implementation. We'll be going through the key principles alongside a few illustrative examples of approaches that are more or less likely to be in line with the guidance, and then we'll take some questions at the end. So please feel free to put those in the Q&A at any point. So when we're considering whether an ad is likely to mislead, we're asking, is the average consumer to whom the ad is directed likely to be misled into taking a transactional decision which they would not have otherwise taken? When assessing this question under the consumer protection regulations on which the relevant parts of the codes are based, we cannot definitively ban or mandate a particular type of approach, and so were the ASA to investigate a complaint on this topic, as indeed on any other, it would need to consider the individual ad on its merits and its particular context. However, what we can do is provide examples of scenarios that we think are more or less likely to be in line with the principles. It's important to bear that in mind when looking at any of these examples today, but we hope they will provide a useful guide. So with that in mind, let's press on with our key principles. So firstly, very broadly, an ad is less likely to mislead when advertisers do not state or imply that a price will apply for the full minimum term of the contract, if that is not the case. So for example, wording such as fixed or £20 a month for 18 months is likely to mislead if the price is due to rise before the end of that minimum term. In such a situation, subsequent information detailing the mid-contract price increase is likely to contradict rather than to qualify an initial claim that is likely to give the impression to the consumer that the price applies for the full contract. The next principle states that an ad is less likely to mislead when information indicating the presence or the possibility of a price rise has equal prominence with the price claim. In practice, that is it's more likely for the information to comply if the price rise information is at the same level as the initial price claim. The next principle states that an ad is less likely to mislead when, if known, information about the nature of the price rise is featured prominently within the main copy of the ad. So in static format ads, so ads that don't contain moving images, that would likely be no lower than one step below the information signaling the price increase. So for example, if the price claim was in a heading, the price rise information would need to be in the subheading. And in TV or video ads, it would be more likely to be in line with the guidance if that information is featured within the main copy rather than in the superimposed text only. So here are some examples that illustrate those previous two principles that I outlined. Firstly, for a tiered contract, you can see we have the monthly price, swiftly followed by an indication that it will be increasing. So simply stating when that price will, that initial price will end. And that is at the same level of text as the price claim. Then one step below it, information about what that price rise is going to entail. And looking at an example for advertising a variable contract, we've got the monthly price with information indicating that the price may rise during the contract on the same line. And here we have a description of a few scenarios that are less likely to give adequate prominence to that information about the nature of the price rise. And those are featuring it with an asterisk linking to the information more than one step below the price claim, a link that has to be clicked on or hovered over with a cursor in order to access the information, and in a radio ad, featuring the information only in the terms and conditions that follow the main copy. And I'll now pass over to Duncan to cover off the remaining principles.
Thank you, Beth. So yes, sorry, I'm just gaining control of the screen. Okay, perfect. Okay, so moving on to the next key principle. Ads are more likely to comply when descriptions of future price rises and the terminology used are clear and simple to understand. So the approach least likely to mislead is for terms such as retail price index to be written out in full the first time they appear in an ad, rather than abbreviations like RPI, and then followed with rate of inflation to aid understanding. So we've got an example below, so £48 per month until April 2023. And then just below this, monthly price will increase each April by the retail price index rate of inflation published in January, plus 3.6%. Moving on, again, ads are more likely to comply when advertisers are mindful of the time of year that the ad is published relative to the timings of any compulsory or potential annual inflation-linked increases. We know in most cases the increase is linked to rates of inflation that are published in January, which are then applied a few months later. So in order to be less likely to mislead, we'd advise that once the inflation rates on which an advertiser bases their increase has been published, they include in their ads the known monthly price the consumer will pay once the price rise is applied. It should also go without saying, hopefully, that if a monthly price is set to rise by a known percentage, so not linked to a yet to be published inflation rate, then the full amount of the future rise should always be included. Now, of course, telecoms contracts are often bundled with other products such as content streaming, device payment plans, and so forth. And while customers with variable contracts have the right to exit their plans if the price is increased, doing so can have unanticipated knock-on effects for any of the linked products they have. So where this is applicable, ads should make clear that if a consumer exits a variable telecoms contract due to a price rise, where they will lose a linked product, where the price of a linked product will increase, and or also where they will incur charges as a result of terminating a linked product. Finally, the guidance has made some allowance for the presentation of prices on websites where many different deals appear on the same page, recognizing that it may not be feasible or necessary to include the same price change information in every single listing. By the same token, where a product listing is included on a web page with multiple others, then it may be sufficient to link each price statement to one or more qualifications further down the page, provided that qualification is sufficiently prominent and visible at all times without having to scroll down the web page. So that covers off the key principles. In terms of resources and support, the main one, of course, will be the guidance that we published. But in terms of further support, you can also follow us on Twitter with @ASA_UK and @CAP_UK. You can sign up to our regular newsletters. We also provide regular training seminars and bespoke presentations. And also, when thinking about how to implement these changes in practice, please remember that the CAP Copy Advice service is available for free via our website. They offer a 24-hour turnaround in most cases and can provide insights on any specific non-broadcast ad treatments that you're considering using. And of course, we've got our advice database on our website, and we publish rulings every week on a Wednesday. So we will now take a few questions.
Thanks, Duncan. So if you do have any questions, please do feel free to pop them in the Q&A box. I have received a question which I will read out. So someone did ask, can you please clarify how businesses can be compliant for paid search ads which do not have space capacity to fit CPI messaging? Is there any mitigations that can be taken? We've seen that customers value the merit of being able to see the total cost of ownership of a device on a pay monthly contract to compare against the price of purchasing outright with a SIM-only plan. We understand the reference to total costs. For example, X amount a month for X months would need to be updated in light of the guidance. But how can a business still show customers additional details such as total costs over the lifetime of the contract, taking into account any CPI increases based on the fact that the CPI rates the following year would be unknown? Sorry, I know that's quite lengthy, but I don't know if that's something that we've touched on already that can be expanded on.
I think, Beth, am I right in thinking that the consultation looked at, there was a question around search ads in that, and we, in terms of having enough room to put information in, we didn't think that would be a problem for kind of what this guidance mandates. Does that sound right to you?
Yes, there was some mention of paid search ads that came up in the consultation process, and that was covered in our evaluation. I mean, essentially, this is, the consultation or the guidance is looking specifically at this particular piece of material information that we think is material to consumers' decision and should therefore be sufficiently prominent. There may be other pieces of information, that influenced by the nature of the product, etc. That may influence the space that is available for featuring that information, but that doesn't negate the fact that information about price rises is very important to consumers' decision making, and we think should be clear and upfront to avoid misleading them. But I would say, I mean, there is some discussion of this in the the evaluation documents and that were published in relation to the outcome of the consultation, and in addition, looking at potentially specific issues relating to copy. I think that's something that potentially copy advice might be able to advise on.
Okay, thanks. Next question. Oh, someone asked, will this recording be available? Yes, if you joined a bit later in the session, just so you know, this is being recorded and there is a tab on our website named webinars, and it will be uploaded in that section. So someone asked, can you please elaborate further on tiered contracts versus variable? I believe that's kind of what you touched on a bit earlier. I believe it was tiered claims versus variable claims, but yes, I don't know if you had any further points to kind of add on to what you touched on earlier.
So the question was elaborate on tiered contracts versus variable.
Yes.
I mean, we presented the examples in relation to each of those types of contracts, unless people are asking what. So a tiered contract is a contract that is that has a known price rise like built into it from the start, versus a variable contract that where the provider sort of reserves the right to potentially increase the price at some point during the term. If that answers the question.
Yeah. Next question. Does any CPI messaging also need to incorporate a worked example in the advertising?
I can answer that. So there was some mention of worked examples in the responses that we received. Ultimately, we did not make any kind of specific guidance on inclusion of worked examples within the guidance, as we felt that potentially was not necessarily, going to aid understanding in that context, as we would generally be talking about an illustrative example rather than a representation of what the customer will really pay, as of course in most cases, but that would not be known at the point of advertising. So that's not something that the guidance specifically covers, though. Obviously, I'm aware that that is something that is included within information that is provided to the customer sort of at the point of sale, which is a separate area covered by Ofcom rules.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, if the percentage rise is already known, does the increase need to be shown in pounds rather than the percentage? And if so, should this be the new total monthly cost or just the amount of increase?
So I think we advise that it's less likely to mislead if it's known what the total cost would be. So if it's, I don't know, what, £20 per month until April, and then it goes up to what, and it's going to go up to £25, then you should. I think the guidance says you should include some information that's what the price they'll be paying from month 7 or whatever it is going forward. But the guidance says anyway, like the nature of the price rise should be clear. So you have, if it's based on a percentage, I guess is the question referring basically to if RPI is known, should you say RPI of this? So it will go up by like 4.6%, which is RPI this year plus something else. I think we'd have to take it on a case-by-case basis, but the guidance more talks about saying what the nature of the price rise is, so what it's based on, and then if known, the price people will pay in pounds afterwards.
Okay, thanks. Next question is there any instance that comes to mind when asterisk and footnote would ever be appropriate for the qualification?
We talk. Sorry, Beth.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say we talk about it being no more than one step below on the qualification ladder. So if the price claim is was at the very bottom of the for some reason the price claim was made very far down, the qualification of the ads, then potentially it could appear there one step below, but normally it's used as a headline claim, in which case the guidance says you should only really go one step below.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously hard to say without, looking at specific circumstances, but I suppose, this would never be we can never prescribe a particular approach, absolutely. But in most cases, we think that the least likely to mislead approach will be to have that placed one step below.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Another one is, I think it's been a bit confusing. Someone's mentioned the first principle mentioned. You mentioned that we should avoid using, for example, it says up till or for X months. However, in the subsequent slides, you've used that wording, and they said it seems to contradict. So I don't know off the top of your head if you remember the examples that were used in the presentation, but there seems a bit of confusion as to the use of the claim up till or for X months. That makes sense to either one of you?
I think so. So I think what we're saying don't do is say you'll be paying X amount for 18 months if during that 18 months the price is going to increase, and you know that for sure. But in some of the examples we've said you'll be paying X amount until April 2023, which is when price rise. April's when the price rises almost always come in. So in that case, it's accurate because you're saying you're paying this amount, and then when the price increases at that point, you'd be paying a different amount, which is made clear by the until April 2023 claim.
Thank you. I hope that helps to clarify that particular point. Next one, in regards to the web page's wording, without having to scroll, and put that in quotation marks, this sounds like it could be difficult to achieve, especially when viewed on mobile devices. So they're asking for a bit more clarification on this requirement. So just to repeat the question, so with regards to web page's wording, so in quotation marks, without having to scroll, and then quotation marks again, this sounds like it could be difficult to achieve, especially when viewed on mobile devices. So can you please clarify this requirement? I guess.
I mean, it's not really for us to comment on like how the ads are made, but I mean the requirements just is part of a piece of the guidance that says sometimes when there's multiple offers on a web page, instead of including the price increase information in every single listing, you could potentially have it in one qualification, as long as that's pretty much always visible and sufficiently prominent. If you're not able to achieve that with your kind of current technical setup, then you might want to consider other approaches and potentially just having the information there in each listing.
Okay. Next question. If there's an introductory offer, for example, £28 for 6 months, that would not be affected by a price rise, even if it crosses the time of year when the rise would normally happen, can this element of the package be described as a fixed price?
Sorry, can you
go back to the question? No problem. I'll repeat that question.
Yeah.
if there's an introductory offer, so the example given here is, for example, £28 for 6 months, and that introductory offer will not be affected by a price rise. That's even if it crosses the time of year when a price rise would normally happen. Can this element of the package be described as fixed price?
If there's not a price rise to that amount during that period, then yes, because the guidance is just where a price rise will affect the contract. So if it's not being applied during that period, I don't see what the issue would be.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to the next question then. So someone's asked if they can ask a previous question in another way. So essentially they're asking now, how do we show the price for a 24-month contract, which is subject to 2 RPI increases, where the second increase is unknown in advance? So I don't know if you want me to repeat that again. So how do we show that the price of a 24-month contract, which is subject to 2 RPI increases, where the second increase is unknown in advance?
Would that be in a situation where the current the current CPI increase is known, but then looking ahead to the second one that will be applied later in the contract? I mean, as some of the examples show, I mean, we are aware, obviously, that in many cases, you know, there will be multiple. We're talking about longer contracts. So some of the examples have potentially say like each, you know, will be increased by such and such rates each April, etc. So I think there are ways of making known where relevant that more than one increase will apply.
Okay, thank you. I'm just conscious of time because we've just got 2 minutes left, so I'll answer the next question. For those who have asked questions and you've put your name, we can follow up with those questions and email you directly. For those who've done it anonymously, we'll just have to direct you to copy advice following this session, and they'll be able to answer your questions there. But final question of today is, if there are channels where we can't update the price in 5 days once the rate of CPI is known, what happens? So thinking of Clearcast particularly, but also VOD, RAID and radio. So I'll repeat that again. If there are channels where we can't update the price in 5 days once the rate of CPI is known, what happens? Thinking of Clearcast particularly, but also VOD and radio.
Well, I mean, I believe the guidance says in most cases we think that should be sufficient time. Obviously, that is something that you need to discuss with the clearance bodies, and you know, which we would discuss with them as well. But yeah, that is the time period that was agreed by CAP and BCAP, that they thought in most cases would be sufficient to make those updates.
Okay, thank you. Given the fact that we've only got a few seconds left for this session, again, like I said, any questions that have been put in Q&A, people put their names, we'll try and get back to you. Otherwise, as Duncan mentioned previously, we do have our copy advice team provide free 24-hour mental advice, so you're more than welcome to contact them via our website. We would like to thank everyone for attending the session this morning. Like I said, a copy of the webinar will be made available on our website. If you just search for the webinar tab, it will be uploaded before the end of the week. I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank Duncan and Beth for guiding us through the material this morning. I'll stop recording the session there, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.